he's listening. He's listening. Hi, Andy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Filter the Podcast. I'm Benita.
I'm Sharon.
I'm Celine.
I'm Rebecca.
I'm Hannah.
And welcome back to our series called Breaking the Mold.
Woohoo!
We have a special guest on today, Sheena Samu. Welcome.
Woohoo!
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you on. She is a Emmy Award-winning associate producer for CBS News, currently part of the investigative unit there. Previously, she worked with 60 Minutes, and she's assisted in productions for high-profile interviews with people like President Joe Biden, Malala, Tom Brady, and Rupi Kaur.
Wow, that is a resume.
You guys did your homework. I'm impressed.
Seriously.
You're impressed. Did
Did
you hear
Girl.
those names?
Basically
casual,
starstruck.
The president of America, that's great.
Okay, give us the tea. Who's your favorite? Just kidding.
Ooh.
Just kidding. President Joe Biden is listening right now. Don't say anything.
FBI, we were joking.
The amount of Secret Service stories I have, though, it's embarrassing. I have made myself look like such a fool every time.
Are you allowed to share, or did
I
you
can tell
sign
you
something?
I can tell you one. Oh my God. I tried to, we had this show at the White House and it was early morning. And I think it was maybe for an inauguration. And you have to get through security. And I ran through with scissors in my backpack. And they were screaming down, about to tackle me, thinking that I was coming in with scissors, trying to attack.
Why do you have scissors in your backpack?
You know what, girl?
Don't ask questions.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I promise, it was for nothing. And they're just like, take it out, leave it here, or you're not coming in. I'm like, you got it.
Go get the
Oh my God.
It's like safety scissors.
No, they were full on, I needed to cut cardboard. I was making notepad, note cards for my boss.
Oh,
God. Yeah.
crazy. That's insane. Okay, so do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what sparked your interest in journalism and what got you started in this path?
Yeah, sure. So I was never really sure what I wanted to go to school for. Initially, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go in for teaching. That's what I'll do. But I wasn't so passionate about it. And it was my sister, actually, Serena, she was just like, this is not what you're doing. You're not going to become a teacher. Figure out what you like. What is it that you really like? And I've always loved news. And I think it's because of my dad. He's such a news junkie. But I never thought that it was a job that you could have. No one ever told me, oh, yeah, this is the path you take to become a reporter. Plus, I've never seen anyone in our community do it. So we never spoke about it. I remember talking to my guidance counselor, and she was actually Malayali. And she's just like, you could try it out, go to this school and this school. So I applied to every single school for teaching, and on a whim, right before the deadline for applications, I applied for the Stony Brook Journalism School. I ended up getting accepted into the program, and I'm like, this must be a sign. If the one school that I tried for journalism, so I went and I loved it. It was different, and I felt like I was kind of doing it all on my own, but it was a great experience. So I'm glad.
So cool.
Wait, did you always love writing even as a kid, or
reporting?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I loved it. I was such a nerd. I would just stay up and write my own little stories. And I always told my parents, I just wanted to be a writer. And they're like, no, that's definitely not a job. You can dream, but don't dream that big and wide. But I would just write little stories. If I had something happen in my life, I would write it down and read it to my class. I was that kid. So I was always into the arts, and I was always kind of into just reading and writing and learning. But I wrote for my high school paper, I wrote for our church newsletter, all that stuff. But it was just a hobby in my mind. Writing was just a hobby. It wasn't a career. So I got lucky that it led to journalism, and it worked out.
No, seriously, that's so cool. And that's
Wow.
so cool that the Malayali guidance counselor was actually rooting for you.
Oh,
Because I
yeah.
feel like there's so many Malayali people that'd be like, oh, you want to do journalism? Absolutely not. Go to nursing.
That was
Like,
every single person. Yeah. People would go up. I didn't know this until afterwards, but uncles, when they found out what I was going to school for, because I was also staying away, they're just like, when are you going to tell her not to do that? Like they would
Wow.
tell my parents, tell her not to do this. And it went on all throughout college because you could go to school for this, but that doesn't guarantee you're going to get a job, you
Yeah.
know? And it's a really
Isn't it crazy that your like parents are getting like the heat for letting you?
Totally. Yeah. And I think my mom, my dad loves it and he's so supportive. And so does my mom. But to this day, she's just like, do you want to go back to school for like teaching? Do you want to just like get your master's in something else? And I'm like, I won 2 Emmys, woman. Like this, like it's not like I'm failing at this, but she's
Yeah.
still like afraid of like having to tell people, oh, she's a journalist. Because no, I mean, it's hard to explain. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
She's a journalist. So I get
Mhm.
it on that end. But yeah, my parents definitely got the brunt of just the criticism, and I think they handled it really well. So I got really lucky with them being supportive.
Have you ever gotten like the criticism to your face, or was it more just like to your parents?
No, I got it to my face too, and I don't think they meant it in a
you.
discouraging way, but I mean, you guys are girls in your 20s. They were just like, no one is going to want to be with someone who doesn't have a nursing or a teaching or science degree. So it was very much, how are you going to explain this to someone? No one's going to be interested in that career. And even recently, I was even just told, like, maybe just get like a master's in like business, just so when people approach you, you can tell them that you have a real degree. And it's just for the case of marriage, by the way. We're not talking about having a good job and like being proud of your work. It's so what I can like show people that I do. So I mean, I take it with a grain, like I don't care about that. So if it was a legitimate criticism, but it's not. It's about appeasing other people.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Isn't it
Because
so
they shouldn't be
funny?
marrying you for your
Yeah.
career.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, isn't it so funny that our worth is measured about like what we are doing with our lives so that others can be like, oh, she's in the medical field. She's ripe for the taking, you know? Whereas if you're, oh God forbid, like I don't know, somebody like let's use, journalism, like, oh, it's not a real job.
Yeah.
I think also in like the brown community, like status and title is so important. Like I think I was talking to my uncle the other day and he was like, everybody just cares about like your cars and your houses and that's what they look like. How much like there's a not a stigma. There's a thing where before a daughter gets married, you see every brown parent redo their house because you want the house to look the best for when the guy's family comes over, for when the guy comes over. And because it's like all about the way you put yourself out there, the way that people see you and the status you come from, how much money you have, what you're showing.
Yeah. I was actually just talking to my friends about this because we're all in a similar boat of where we are in relationships and like how our families treat us. But I think within the Malayali community, specifically from what I've seen, you kind of raise your daughters to give them away in a sense of they have to be this and this. And there's so like you want them to be the best, you want them to do all of that stuff. But then you raise these really independent, self-motivating women who are not going to deal with like what other boys are doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you get in trouble, or you're just like, oh, now you're being like too pushy. Now you're being like too much. You think too highly of yourself. Like I get that a lot. I'm like, I get like, oh, you know what? Just like humble yourself a little bit in your career. Like, don't talk about all of these things in general. Like, I'm such an anxious person talking about anything with work. I don't do that. And I don't like bringing it up on dates, and I don't like talking about it with a bunch of people. But other folks are just like, you don't want the boy to feel intimidated. You don't want him to feel like this, or you approach boys because of this. And I'm just so sick of that narrative because it goes back once again to what we have to do to make other people comfortable. And no, not in 2022, girls.
Never that.
They should be honored to be sitting with an Emmy Award winning person. Seriously. So in the type of work that you do, I see that you lean towards more the social justice side of journalism. Is there something that like compelled you to go towards that side instead of like pop culture or something else? Like, that's the first thing that came to my head.
No, that's a good question. So when I was going through this phase of applying for schools and figuring out what I wanted to do, I remember a friend invited me to some church event that they were hosting. And that's just like not my scene to like go to these like big functions. So I'm like kicking and like shouting. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go. And it ended up being this charity event for human trafficking. And they were talking about human trafficking in India. And I was 16, 17 years old at that time. And I remember walking in and being so angry that I've never heard of human trafficking before. To me, that was mind blowing. Seeing these girls who resembled me, and it was #1 cases in the world were in India. Like, I thought it was so absurd. And I was asking myself, like, well, who's responsible for telling me this? Like, I didn't know this information. So who would have been responsible for telling me this? And I realized it's journalists. It's the people who go out, report these things, and share it with the rest of the world. My dad always raised me like, if you see something, say something. He's about the littlest things. He's just like, if there's a problem and no one's talking about it, then you should be the one to speak about it. So at that moment, I'm like, okay, if there's one thing I get out of, like, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a career, I want it to be to do something that's helping other people. And I kind of made it a vow at that point. I never want to find myself in a situation where I see an atrocity like human trafficking or something else, and I have no way of helping or telling someone else about it. So for me, that kind of like clicked something in my head. And I was just like, I'm going to apply to Stony, but I'm going to try this one journalism school.
Oh, so this was before you even applied?
This was before I even applied. Yeah. And that made me realize that there was a pit in my stomach of just, this is going on. And I felt so stupid that I didn't know this at like the big age of 17. And so from there, I realized those are the stories that I care about. And like, in my career, I've done the pop culture, I've done like the shows and all of that stuff. And and I think it's fun and people love watching it. And I'm not saying anything against that. But for me, I just find so much more worth in putting out those kind of stories that help people and like educate people. Because I wasn't educated, and I'll admit that. And that's why I did it.
No, even right now, I didn't even know that. Like, you saying that right now is just like opening my eyes, because I mean, I don't really watch the news and stuff like that. So even like hearing this information,
Yeah.
it's never even.
No, absolutely. And I think that's exactly what I respect about journalism, is that you really have this responsibility to just kind of educate people and not just like share useless information, but kind of give people action steps on what to do. Now, here's the information. This is what we've learned. And like, here are some steps to make these things better. So it's kind of what led me to that.
When you go into these investigative like places, right? Do you ever feel like threatened, or like you feel like you're unsafe? Because I know that you're going into like, like the in India, like the child trafficking, and I'm sure you've done so many more things that like I can't even imagine. Like, do you ever feel like threatened or like in danger of your life?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't want to woe is me the conversation, but we do have crisis training. They teach us, like, if you're in it, we've done a lot of just like terror attacks. We've done a lot of coverage for hurricanes and stuff like that. So they teach us things to prepare ourselves if there's a bomb threat, if we have security that comes with us. And there's definitely been situations that I was very scared of. But they prepare you enough to be smart about your surroundings. They give us security. I think I'm lucky that I work for a big network where they take those precautions. I think honestly, the hard part is leaving those situations and like having the tools to like break down what happened to you and just like deal with it at that point. Like, that's for me, is coming out of it and being like, okay, like, what did I just see? Time to process it. Like, that's the harder part.
That's what I was gonna ask. Like, what about like emotion wise? Like, I feel like it's a roller coaster because you're seeing things like firsthand. How do you feel like your emotions play into like the job?
Oh, absolutely. It's honestly, it would take me so long to process things. And I've been in this career now for 7 years. And one of my first big jobs was working for the morning show. So I was an anchor producer. So we were traveling for breaking news all the time. We were covering all of these heartbreaking stories. And I didn't process it. We would be covering a story for a week. For example, we did the Las Vegas shooting. And so I was working all of the week before that. We were traveling. We did our interview with Tom Brady. We did an interview on a shooting in DC. And so I was supposed to get the day off, but then I slept for like 2 hours. I got a notification that, hey, a shooting happened in Vegas. So I immediately knew they're going to send us to Vegas. So after like an hour of sleep, I get into the city. Shooting just happened and we're immediately on a plane. And we were there. I left with the clothes on my back. Like I was there buying hotel clothes because I had nothing. So I'm there like in like these giant like sweaters and t-shirts, and then we're walking, and I like, didn't have proper shoes, and I'm like in these sandals because it was warmer here, like on the East Coast. It was, and I remember just feeling the entire time that I was an autopilot, and we're in the hospital talking to victims. We're literally stepping on like blood that's people like, yeah, like where bodies were being dragged away. And that was so much for me to process. And going into that, I literally passed out on the plane from exhaustion.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I wasn't taking care of myself at all. And I think at that point, I realized, okay, this is not good. I was so exhausted and it was mentally draining. But I would come home after a lot of these things and I wouldn't speak to my family or friends for a few days. And I never knew why. And I was just like, everyone's getting on my nerves. Like, no one understands. But I wasn't allowing myself to process what was happening. And so that would just manifest in me being really closed off and me being shut off from everyone else and compartmentalizing. And I would never process these things. And genuinely, I'm not joking around, you guys. I didn't process the last 5 years up until 3 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And there are so many things that just built up and built up. And I would resent people for like not understanding and not sympathizing with other people. And like, your problems are so small. And that's not fair. People are like, their feelings are valid as big or small. Like you can't compare. Like it's so unfair for me to have done. But I wasn't, this is a me, I wasn't processing, and I wasn't taking the steps to kind of go through. I was just going from one breaking news story to another, from like one investigation to like another. And so, yeah, it took me a long, long time.
Do you feel like it was sort of like traumatic in a way, or just like you just didn't even have the time to even think about it?
I think it was both. I think I was so go, go, go because I was incredibly grateful to have the position that I got. And I knew that like the next person was ready to take it from me. Like it's cutthroat. And so I would work so late and so often just because I wanted to move up the ladder. Like my friends would make fun of me. Like I would be the first one to fall asleep. Like we would hang out and I'm like knocked out by 6 p.m. I'm like sleeping. I'm like, what happened? Oh, you guys were still hanging out? Like I had no idea. I just wasn't processing things. But also I think I just didn't want to because I was incapable of reliving a lot of what I saw because I didn't think anyone would understand. And I didn't want to be the bummer in the group of like, hey, we were at this hurricane and this happened, or we were at this shooting, and hey, this happened in our workplace with like the Me Too movement. I didn't think anyone was capable of understanding. So I didn't want to bum out other people. And in doing that, I think I created this like block around myself, and it only ended up hurting me. And then I would project, and my poor sister dealt with so much of it, and like my immediately close friends. And I never understood why they would be like, oh, like you need help, sweetie. And I'm like, don't tell me I need help. Like I would get so defensive about it.
So you mentioned some of the challenges and how emotionally draining it got for you at one point. How did you end up coping with that? You said that within the last 3 months, you started actually realizing what you were going through. So how did you cope with all of that?
Exclusive. I started going to therapy.
We support
It helps.
therapy.
We support therapy. We've been saying it and we'll continue to say it. Everybody needs therapy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let me tell you, I hated therapy when I started it. I genuinely hate. I was just like, I don't need help. Like I'm okay. But it was to a point where, so I was working for 60 Minutes, like right after I was doing this morning show, and it's a great show, like #1 show. And it was heavy. You're still doing like heavy stuff. And I decided in January, like I'm like just not functioning as a human being anymore. And it got to a point where I was I grew up with anxiety, like even as a child, like my parents always knew it, and they taught me how to cope with some stuff, but and they're great. And I'll give them so much credit. Like since I was a child, like my mom was just like breathing exercises, like, let's do this. So
that's phenomenal actually for
she was great about that. Like, and I remember being a kid and being like, okay, like, let's just like relax, let's think about it. But I mean, as you get older, the coping mechanisms at 7 are not going to help you at 27, you know?
Yeah.
So it just got to a point where I was so anxious and stressed out that I ended up going to the hospital. Like I was so stressed out. I thought I was having a heart attack. Like it was really, really bad. And I think at that point, I'm just like, you need to take a break. Like this is just not a livable life. So I took a few months off, and it was my sister and my best friend. We were just having dinner one night, and we were talking about like just casual things, but I like clammed up and I couldn't continue the conversation. I was just so anxious. And at that point, like my dad and my sister and my friend, they're just like, maybe you should consider talking to someone just to like learn how to process all of these things. And I didn't want to. I hated the idea of it. And I knew it worked for other people. I'm not saying that I was just like, oh, I don't need therapy, but I genuinely didn't think I needed therapy. I started and I hated it. It was a slow, gradual process, but oh my gosh, it really, really helped. I think it just helped in being validated, one, that your problems aren't made up in your head, and like two, really how to communicate them, because I was not communicating my issues at all. I was just holding it in, and I had so much resentment and so much anger. And honestly, I didn't think I had trauma until my therapist was just like, you're living with trauma. Like, this is what it is. Like, we're going to work through that. And it's okay for you to like cry about it and to kind of relive it so that you can grow from it. Like I kept this all back. Like there were things from like 2016, 2015 that I just did not work through, that were like going through and talking about, and just me feeling like I'm not crazy. And I think feeling that I'm not weak, because that's what I was so afraid of. I felt like people were so proud of me for being like that Malayali girl who made it into the industry. She did all of this, and they were like, she won these Emmys, and like she's doing all of this. And I'm happy to be that person and be like, yes, there's a way. But I was embarrassed that I couldn't do it on my own. And I was embarrassed, and I felt upset that almost like I was disappointing people by being
asking for help.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it is a great job, and I think more people should do it, and I hope more like people in our community see it, because I think we open up a lot of avenues for different stories, and it's so important. And I was disappointed in myself for not being able to like handle it on my own, and that's why it took me 6-7 years to finally be like, okay, like how do I be better? Like I don't want to keep living like this.
Honestly, like, but even like deciding to go to therapy, even when you don't even want to go, like that itself shows like okay, you're getting there, you know?
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of times it's more like, oh, okay, I'm like, okay, I feel like something's wrong, so let me go to therapy. But for your case, he was like, nothing's wrong. You didn't even notice it in the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
So I think do you think like it was crazy for you because you were in such a cutthroat position? Because even you were saying like, you know, there was people waiting to take your job. So there was no option of saying, hey, I can't do that this week, or I can't. No, you can't say really no, because you said no, someone else is coming and taking over.
Totally. And I think also for me, I felt guilty about having problems because of the stories I was covering. You know, like we were covering military sexual assault, we're covering people losing their homes in a hurricane, we're covering a mass shooting. And here I am randomly just driving down the street, no issues. And then I start bawling and I can't breathe. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? There are bigger problems in the world. And I think a lot of it was guilt. I'm like, I go to these places, I tell the story, and then I get to leave. And I always felt so much guilt about that. And so I didn't want to have to admit that I had an issue, because for me, it felt like I was taking away from someone else's issues. And what I've learned in therapy is that all of our feelings are valid, and it's okay. And how can I be a better person for other people if I'm not being there for myself? You know, I think therapy is making me a better journalist, and it's a slow process, and I'm still working on it. But I'm so glad that I had close people around me to be like, you need to like take care of yourself.
So I have a question. Would you recommend, if anybody is going into journalism, to start therapy beforehand? Because I know like a lot of people say, even though you're all chirpy and happy and stuff, like everybody still needs therapy just to talk it out. And so would you recommend like going to it before you even get into the career?
Oh, 100%. And that's a great question. And I wish someone convinced me of that at 21. I remember I mean, I know this because of like a lot of my friends and what I've seen people go through, but even in journalism school, it was kind of a joke of like, oh, how do journalists like keep doing their job? And the answer was drinking. Like we had professors telling us like, you're going to build up a really good tolerance. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. What do you mean? I'm like, I'm a lightweight. Like, I did not want to do that. And so it was, we didn't really, honestly, that's just like, you deal with it. And then you go out with your friends and you're all around the same age working this crazy job, and you don't really process it. You don't process any of it. I think 100%, if I had gone and knew the tools to take care of myself, it would have made things a lot better. And just for the people around me too. I was difficult to be around because I wasn't working through my stuff.
Do you think it was also hard because there's like really no brown reporters out there for you to have like someone to turn to or get advice from?
Yeah, 100%. I still to this day, I wish there was someone that I could have gone to. And so when I was going into school, I'm not trying to expose anyone, so I'm not saying any names. When I was going into school,
say the name, we'll beep it out. I'm just kidding.
My like second or third cousin knew of a girl who knew of a girl on Facebook, and that was the closest connection to me having someone who worked in journalism. And she was doing magazine stuff. Like it wasn't even news like me.
Same, yeah.
Yeah. So then I like reached out to her and I was just like, hi, like total such a dweeb, like, hi, like I'm going to journalism school. Like, I don't know any other Malayalis or like any people in general. Like, do you have any advice? Like, I'd love to talk. And she was just like, good luck. Like, it'll work out. Okay. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm not coming for your job, ma'am. Like I'm going into school. Like, why is there a competition here? Like, it just felt, for me, I was so devastated by that. And I felt like, you know what? Like, no one's going to be here for me. And I think that's why I worked so hard at it as well. Because I had to prove to myself, my parents, everyone who went up to my parents and said this wasn't a good idea, that I could do it. And I'm not kidding you guys. I've done jobs so many places, and almost every single newsroom that I've been in, I've been the only brown person.
I was gonna say, like, how did you get your foot in the door of CBS?
Oh, girl.
Like, genuinely, because if you had no connections, well, I don't know if you did or not, but brown connections, because I feel like that's the most powerful tool.
Yeah.
If you know a brown person somewhere, you're gonna get yourself in.
Yeah.
But like, you didn't even have that. So how did you get yourself in there?
Yeah, so CBS has an internship program that you have to apply to.
Okay.
But even applying to, you have to know a specific email of like the person to apply to. Like, it's so cutthroat. And this girl who lived across the hall from me in my dorm, and she's just like crazy competitive and everything. I was over at her place and I was just kind of telling her like how nervous I was, because every other person that I know when they get into journalism, like, oh, my dad worked here, or I have this family friend, and we like, oh, they are in the same country club, and that's how like they gave me my email. And I was just like, crap, like I don't have that at all. Like, my family isn't at that point where we're like swapping numbers in Aspen and we're like, you know what I mean? Like, that just wasn't it. And so I'm like telling her I'm just a little nervous, and she's just like, Sheena, this is so out of character of me, and I don't know why I'm being compelled to do this, but here is this woman's email. And we're competing with each other at that point.
Yeah.
When I tell you guys, I'm like, see God, like this, that
no is God.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is no way that I would have got that email if for some reason she was just like, something about you was just telling me, I need to give you this email. I emailed the woman and I had a giant group interview and I got the internship. And so I got the I got the internship, and I was working at the evening news with Scott Pelley. And I was like a fact checker. And then that was 6 months, and it was the best internship. Like, I loved it. I knew in that moment, I'm just like, oh, I'm in the right spot. Like, I'm going to work my butt off. I'm not leaving this place. You're going to drag me out of here. I graduated, and then I called them every single day to just give me like some type of job. I'm just like, don't kick me out. Like, I will work for nothing. And when I tell you, I ended up working for nothing. I was making less money graduated than I was as an intern still in school.
That's crazy.
Like, yeah. And I was working 7 days.
Is that legal? I don't know.
Oh, it was still minimum. It was just, I don't know. It was minimum wage. And I think interns are just treated better at that point. Like, my job at that point was, I was working for I was working for like the Colbert Show, John Oliver. Like, it wasn't news that I was doing. They are under CBS. So I was like a line leader for people. Like, I was getting people into the audience, and I hated it. Colbert is amazing. That stuff is fun, and people were excited. Like, oh my God, you graduated and you're working at Colbert. And I'm like, I don't care. I want to work on the Sunday news. I want to be here. And then so I would ask them for more shifts. So I was working 7 days a week, just like begging them for like the news shifts. So when I stayed there for the news shifts, the vice president of CBS News at the time was seeing me every day. And like him, and I knew he was like a big deal, whatever. And he would just like make eye contact with me in a weird way. And I'm just like, oh my God, does he like hate me? Does he not want me to do whatever? One day he approached me on like a Saturday night and he's just like, hi, like I'm so and so. And I'm like, hi, I'm Sheena. He's just like, are there problems at home? I'm like, excuse me? And he's just like, why do I see like, do you have a place to go home? I'm like, what are you talking
Oh
about? He's
my
like, I've seen
gosh.
you here every single day. I've seen you here for breaking news. I've seen you here on the weekends. Like, what is going on? Who's hiring you that you can work? This is not okay. And I was like, oh my God. And so I told him about what I was doing. He's just like, oh no, we're getting you a job. And so he helped me switch over and get into like a full time. He gave me a recommendation to
Wow.
move to the morning show. I would work on a tiny little reception desk when you first enter the newsroom. And the main newsroom was like our morning show. And so the executive producer, the guy who runs the show, would pass by me every single day. And I would be there when he got in and I would be there when he left. So he saw me. And so he introduced himself. He's just like, who are you? Like, why am I always seeing you? You don't work for my show. And I explained that to him. And then the VP of news was just like, you need to hire this girl. Like, she's like a hard worker. She's always here. I ended up getting so they're called broadcast associate.
Oh my God, they say I almost got it. I thought you said you got his job.
Yeah.
I ended up being his number 2. So I beat out all of the other people who were already working at that show. And I was like working at the desk with him. And 6 months
Wow.
after that, he was just like, okay, I'm moving you up. So it honestly, like, I just showed up and I stayed. Like they had to like kick me out. So it was really like, I didn't have anyone else until people noticed me.
Yeah.
And
So
what do
it's
we
not
learn,
about,
everybody?
yeah, it's not about the
Occupy
lucky.
spaces that
Yeah.
you don't think you belong in. Stay where you're not
Exactly.
wanted.
Exactly.
Guys, I'm not kidding around. It is tough and it is hard, but make yourself known. Take up space. I had to learn the hard way, but I'm telling you, take up space. No one will invite you into all of these places. You really have to like pull a seat up. And I did that. And I I wish I had someone to help me. Like that would have been great for advice of like how to not be the weird girl who's there every day. But,
But hey, it
it worked
worked for
out.
you.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But it's also not about luck or anything like that. Like you wanted it. And you
And
were
God made the
driven.
path for her.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really think that God will see the desires of your heart. And when you put in the work and just like really take time to do it, he's going to honor that. And of course, it's to like the opportunities that you should be at. There are a lot of doors that have been closed and I never understood it. And looking back now, I'm like, okay, I get that. Like, I get why that was a short-lived thing, or I get why I moved here and whatnot. And in the moment, I didn't understand because I'm like, I know I'm a hard worker. I know I deserve that. Like, even with, so I was at 60 Minutes and that was the dream job. Like me in journalism school, I'm like, there's no way I'm never going to get into 60 Minutes. Like, I'm just going to work hard until enough to like be around 60. And I ended up getting the job at 60 3 years ago. And I stayed there for 3 years and it was great and it was difficult. And then I realized, you know what? Maybe it's just time for some bigger dreams. Like I'm allowed to dream bigger now. I'm allowed to want more. And it felt like it was being something that was taken away from me because I was dealing with so much anxiety and whatnot with the job. But now where I'm at working for the investigative unit, I'm like, wow, God really provided even in that time of me being so anxious and me being so burnt out and brought me to a place where I really feel 7 years into my career, guys, I'm learning the most that I ever have. Like that's just, I feel like, okay, he knew what to do. I worked through what I needed to work through and I still am. So I feel it almost feels like I'm starting like this new chapter in my career, even though it's been so long.
What is your ultimate like goal career-wise and where you want to be headed in the future?
Or do you even have an ultimate goal?
Or in the next 5 years, where do you want to be?
Yeah. That's a good question. I love what I'm doing now. And I think I'm finally at a place where I have some sense of autonomy in my job, where I can say no to things and I will fight for the stories that I want to do. And, you know, the dream used to be 60 and I did that and I'm moving on. And the dream was always investigations. And now I'm doing that. So I'll give it another year and then I'll see what bigger dreams I have. You know, I'm going to take
That's
it one
good.
at a time. Yeah. And I'm really enjoying this. And I think the work is important. And I think we're helping people and it's tough, but I mean, if someone's got to do it, So I'm glad where I'm at right now. And I think it's a learning curve, but I'm really enjoying it. So
So you're basically saying you're at your dream job.
I'm saying that
For
God
now.
provides,
For now.
and
The dream always changes.
The dream can change. You can, that's what I've learned. You can change your dreams. You can want to learn more. And so I'm going to take it year by year. I think right now Sheena's an investigative reporter.
Amen.
In 2 years, all right? Ask me to get in 2 years. Maybe I'll retire.
Come back to Filtered in 2 years. We'll see what she's doing.
So what would be your favorite piece you've worked on, or the one that you're most proud of this whole like career you've built for yourself?
I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
The first one, we did a story on, and I think it's just like close to my heart when we do like women's issues. We did a story on, it was my first investigation actually a few years ago. We did an investigation into sexual assault at the Air Force Academy. And there were a bunch of female cadets who were being assaulted, and the academy wasn't taking their cases seriously. They weren't processing their rape kits. These girls were then ended up leaving school and all this stuff. And so we spoke to a couple of them, some of them like anonymous. And I just remember being there in Colorado and hearing their stories. And I mean, I had like binders of just like the cases and like details of all of this stuff that they provided us. And it was heartbreaking. But being in the room and hearing them tell the stories to us in person, our camera guy had to stop recording at sometimes because we were crying too loud. Like I was in the background and just sobbing, and they're just like, okay, we're gonna take a break. And I'm like, they're like blowing my nose, like full on sobbing. We ended up doing the story, and I just remember at that moment feeling so grateful for them for being so brave to talk about these things and to even just trust us to tell their story. We put the story out. The Air Force Academy ended up having to address it. They changed their policies, like change happened. And I think that's what I'm just grateful for, because then the work is actually worth it, and their stories were heard and they had some closure in the end of that. So that was a great one. And I think that one was just like, oh, I like investigations. Like we're helping people, and I'm glad that we got to help those women. That was the first one. I think the most recent one I'm proud of because a lot of it I got to have ownership of. And I was working for 60. This was, I believe, in 2020 or 2021, whenever we were leaving Afghanistan. And I found an old friend of mine. He moved to be an anchor somewhere else. And he like texted me. He's just like, hey, I was talking to this guy in the military, and he's telling me that as people are leaving, they're pulling out troops. There's a group of Afghan translators who are being left behind. And at this point, no one was covering the story. Like we just knew that, hey, the removal of like the war is over. We're getting our troops out. We're getting our people out. But a date wasn't set, and no one was talking about the translators. So basically, Afghan translators who were helping the U.S. military, they were told that if you work for us for 2 or so years, we're going to keep you safe. We're going to keep you safe from the Taliban. We're going to keep you safe from everything. And we'll give you a safe passage out of Afghanistan and into the U.S. or into another country. But the removal of all of our troops, it was so messy. Like this was all during that summer, and it was crazy. And over like 15,000 were left behind. And they're the number one target for the Taliban. So they were getting letters from the Taliban saying, the moment that the US Army leaves, like, we're taking your head. And we saw these letters. So I found a translator who made it to the US safely. We found a translator who was still stuck there. And we had to coordinate with, we called them fixers, or so people who are on the ground in Kabul. And they were helping us be our translators essentially, and like get the stuff going. We talked to this guy. He was stuck there throughout our entire story. We had to go to the State Department. The State Department didn't have answers. We had to talk to the guy here, how long it took them. Like they had young kids. And this man knew, he showed us letters of the Taliban being like, just wait, the moment that this thing is done, like you're on our number one hit list. So he's talking to us in a secret hideout, afraid for his life. And he's sharing the story with us. We ended up airing the story. He got stuck in Afghanistan. And 2 weeks later, we found out that he was able to be removed, and we were so grateful for it. But then now we had two people. It was a young woman and honestly, a boy. He was only 21. They were helping us with our piece. The Taliban found out that they were helping us. They were on the hit list because you become enemy number one in that moment. So they were writing to us terrified. And because I was the producer on the piece, I'm being told by like folks at the State Department, we had reporters and journalists there. So CBS was trying to get out our folks. We had like planes going in and out. And I had to write to our executive producer, the CEO of CBS, like every head. And I'm begging them. I'm like, there's a visa where if you work for a US company, they can still help you get out if your life is in danger. These two kids, their life was in danger. So I was on vacation in Puerto Rico because I just finished the story and I'm like, I'm going to like take a mental health break. And I remember being there just like writing these letters, begging them, like, these are kids, like, we need to get them out. If it wasn't for them, this story would have never happened. Like, what's going on? And I had to write all these letters to the State Department, to our, like, the president of CBS. And I remember this guy was just being so scared and like terrified. He's just waiting at the airport. He's like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I can't make it home. And just that devastation of just, I felt responsible because I needed to fix her. I asked these two people, like, help me with the story. And now they're stuck there. I pushed and pushed and pushed. We ended up getting them on a plane and they're both safe.
Yay.
Praise God.
Yo, I was at the edge of my seat. I was like,
and it was a close call. When I tell you guys, they were on like the last plane and I had to like get their information, do all of this stuff. And we had to go through another translator, but I mean, they helped tell us our story. They did the work as well. Why should they have their life at risk for me? Like, I don't want that on my head. Like, this was terrifying. And we even got the guy who helped us on our story. He got out and he's in London with his family. So I'm like, praise God. But that's why we did the work, right? Like they helped us. And I think for me, it just felt so good that they were safe, one, but also, okay, Sheena, like, this is why you do it. We got to tell the story and it was such an important story. Like John Oliver covered it on his like show. And like, what a full circle moment where I used to like line up audience members for John Oliver.
Oh my God.
His main segment was showing my entire piece of how crazy the situation was. And then through that, we got two guys out. We got a young girl and a young guy out and they're safe. So that easily.
That's amazing.
Seriously, that's incredible.
That's what makes it all worth it. Seeing
Yeah.
more. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Who are some journalist icons that you admire?
Christiane Amanpour, I think, is just phenomenal. She's so good at what she does. She does a lot of foreign news. She covers a lot of big stuff. And for me, like, I always admired her. So I respect the heck out of her. And I think that's who, like, I always just want to have that level of professionalism and caring for my stories. And I think it's hard to do. It's really easy to get jaded in the business. And I think she still continuously is just so respectable in that sense. I would say her. I loved Anderson Cooper when I was growing up. Like, it was like a running joke with my friends. Like, I had like the biggest crush on him. So I mean, like, also see God that I've like got to work on a piece with him.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got to work with him.
Emmy for with him.
Got it. Did your homework. Won an Emmy with him. Yes. He doesn't know my name still.
Stop, he's listening. He's listening. Hi, Andy.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm so lucky. I got to work with all of these people that I grew up watching and that my parents like would watch and show me. So I feel blessed. With anyone that I've got to be with, I feel really lucky in my position.
That's amazing.
I have a question that doesn't have to do with any of this, but just I want to know.
Yes.
How long does it take for these stories to like come out?
Oh,
Ask that too.
Great question. So it honestly depends on what we're covering. So when I was working for the morning show, we did breaking news. So that was pretty quick. Like, we had to like do all of this work and the next day we're putting out a story. For longer stuff like investigations, the sexual assault one, that was a 6-month investigation.
Wow.
I'm working on a story right now in a similar thread, and I've been working on it since July, and it's still not, like, I'm still reporting it out. Like, it's not close to being done. So
you can work on two things at the same time, or?
Totally. Yeah. You have to, I think, be able to just juggle a bunch of stuff. So it really depends on 60, they give you a lot more time. 60 minutes gives you a lot more time. So that's great. But I think with investigations specifically right now, you really have to report it out, make sure that you're getting the facts right. We work with a team of lawyers. We work with a team of, like, they call it rights and clearances, so that we make sure we're using the right stuff. I have seniors. So there's a whole level of checks and balances to make sure we're putting out the correct thing and that we're doing it in an ethical way. So it can take time, but then you can work in a morning show and put something out in 2 days or a day. Yeah.
I have another question. That has nothing to do with anything. Do you catch yourself a lot, like, doing a lot of work, like, outside of work hours?
Oh, I don't even know what work hours look like. I'm terrible about work-life balance, and I'm trying to be better now. But my sister always jokes, my sister Serena, we're super close, and she always jokes that I've been training her to have like a not reliable husband, because I'll be like, we'll be out for dinner, and I'm like, I have like 2 phones out, and I'm like taking calls, and I'm just like never there. Like, oh, we can't go out and like go to a movie because I'm working. I'm just always on call.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to be better about it, but I mean, yeah, I'm definitely not. Like it's not good.
Always on the clock.
Always on the clock. The news never
Oh,
sleeps,
gosh.
ladies.
The news never sleeps. That's true.
Always stressed.
So, what advice would you give to anybody who is wanting to go into this field?
Yeah, I would say if it's something that you really want to do, just go for it. No one's going to hold your hand through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really just have to be fully committed, and it's going to be hard, but I think if it's something that you're invested in, something that you care about, God will make a way. Like it's there's no reason why I should end up where I've ended up, considering what I had to go into. So I think 100% ask for help if you can. Now, listen, now you've got a girl on the inside. Ask for help. I am always willing to help anyone. But really just like to push through. And also just you can rely on people even if they don't understand what you're going through. I think having a support system, and I love this about you guys, that you guys have each other, but a support system that can just tell you, you know what, hey, I think you need to check on yourself and take a minute, or hey, we can talk about this. Like maybe I won't understand it, but that is a game changer of just people who are going to help you rise up and just like really just like give you your flowers and just like praise you when you need it. And then when you're going through it, be like, okay, we'll process this together. I think that if it wasn't for a great community, and I think girls are great about this, and that's why I love girls, and just like, they will hold you through it all. Like find the people, find your circle. It's life-changing. I will say though, what I've learned is it is so important to have a life outside of your job. Like your career is not it's not defined as being your purpose. I think there's such an importance in just taking care of yourself and like having a community outside of work. There's a lot of fulfillment. There's a lot that can happen outside of like your office and your newsroom.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for coming on. Seriously. Thank you guys for listening. Follow Sheena on Instagram, Sheena Samu.
Yeah, go support her.
Because we want to know what she's doing in 2 years. Is she still going to be an investigative reporter? We need to know. So follow her. Follow us on Instagram at Filter the Podcast, and listen to us on wherever you listen to your podcast: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, etc., etc. And if you have any questions or comments that you want to send us anonymously, we have a link in our bio that you can do that, or you can just send us a DM. We would love to chat with you. And we love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye,
God bless.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Jesus loves
We
you.
love you.